Destin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure to be here.
Honor, man. Like I told you before, I've been following you for a while, reading your content about evolved masculinity, and you kind of disappeared for a bit, and then it came back on the radar. And I was like, I knew I had to have you on the show because I believe that your background, being a tribesman yourself, and sex in Judaism and what we've been taught needs some newness to it, needs a different viewpoint. And so if you can tell everybody what is exactly that you do and how you do it, like where the background of getting involved in men's masculinity is, especially sex, that'd be a great start.
Yeah, sure. So I've been doing some form of specific work around sexuality for about 25 years now, and it focus more specifically around men and masculinity in the 21st century, etc., starting about 10 or 12 years ago. But as far as the origin story, so to speak, well, one, I grew up in a broken home, and and there was a lot of pain and early childhood trauma related to all of that. But then in my high school years, my girlfriend was raped on her 15th birthday right before we met. And I was the first person she told. I was 16. Wasn't emotionally equipped to handle that. And we ended up being together for the next few years. And while obviously it had a massive impact on her, it also had its own major impact on me. And there was a point where, in a state of like frustration, exasperation, I made a declaration that I was going to do everything I could with my life to create a world where things like this didn't happen anymore. So that was about 25 years ago. I went to NYU for undergrad. They had one of the few programs around sexuality education work in the country. By the time I was a junior, I kind of fought my way into the master's classes. Once I did my first trainings to be a peer sexual health advocate on campus. So it started young and it never stopped. And then I went through another massive shift in my late 20s when I came to recognize that I had some serious wounds around my masculinity and my relationships with other men, and did a deep dive, particularly in 2007, to actively explore these parts of myself, including trying to find an answer to the question of like, what does healthy, like fully integrated yet expressed male sexuality look like? And when I started like asking that question, I'm like looking around and it was a desert out there.
Yeah.
And so I kind of came up with this challenge for myself of, if I'm having this much of a hard time finding role models around this, then what would it look like for me to become that role model that I wish that I had? And that's really my challenge, of course, to everybody listening to this, is what would it be like for you to really step into and become the role model that you wish that you had? Because other men need it.
And the fact that you said that, I'll tell you really quickly a little bit of my history that I've never mentioned to you. It just popped into my head. Years ago when I was young, graduated high school, went to college, and actually was on a path to become a sex coach, sex therapist, because I didn't see those loving relationships, the that evolved masculine that you talk about, the healthy sexual masculine coming forward and giving me you know, something to look up to, essentially.
Yep.
And so I went down that path for a while, decided, not like yourself, decided to go a different path. But I know it and I feel it. And so thank you for doing the work that you do, because it's extremely important. Just being on your website, looking at your banner, be the man the world needs and the one that she craves, become the best lover she's ever had. Whenever I talk with my friends and we're sitting down, it's always like, oh, sex sucks, and my wife and my relationship and all this type of stuff. So let me ask you this question. What is it that men want? And then we'll talk about what is it that women want.
little questions.
Little questions.
Okay. So again, these are always, anytime we talk about men and women, we're speaking from broad brushstrokes.
Yeah.
So there are always exceptions, but these are the general themes that I've noticed through working with literally thousands of people. Men want to feel confident in themselves and in their body, and with both, to be honest, for most men, what they're really craving is less about their um, just their physical pleasure, and
Mhm.
more about the feeling of being a great lover, the feeling of yes, I rocked her world type of a thing. And as I state there, that type of confidence that a man can experience when he knows without a shadow of a doubt that he's the best lover she's ever had. Now, whether on one level or another, men want that. Men want to know that,
Agree.
and they want to feel like they're doing a good job, whether we're talking about sex or anything in life, you know. And I think Jewish men particularly have this, because of our relationship to mom, etc.
Yes.
Tend to particularly have. I listen to some of your other podcast episodes. Have that thing about let me know that I was a good boy, that I did the job right, and so that can
Yeah.
extend over into sex as well. But then at the same time, we want to know that we can trust our bodies, and they're not just going to betray us. And the ways in which men often end up feeling that type of betrayal of our body is feeling like either we're coming before we want to, or we're not getting erections or keeping them when we're wanting to.
Yeah.
And so those things can come up and be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
and they can eat away at a man's confidence, incredibly so. And there's a lot out in the marketplace, so to speak, that, in my opinion, more than anything, takes advantage of those pains and how poorly they are discussed. So, any gas station in the country, you can find pills containing who knows what being sold to you at too much. But are they really going to get you the results that you're really looking for? And particularly, are they going to be more than a Band-Aid? But men want to know that they've got a sense of control of their bodies. And I hesitate to use the word control, but it is a way in which a lot of men think about it.
Yeah.
I hesitate because one of the problems with both of these issues, rapid ejaculation and erection difficulties, can sometimes come from sorry, child.
It's all good. I've got 3 girls myself.
Home office.
I have 3 girls. No worries.
Awesome. Can come from him needing to be I need to have control here, and it can create such tension in his body that tension can create the very problems, can speed him towards ejaculation, or can interfere with him getting proper blood flow and with his erections. So sometimes sometimes you gain more control by learning how to relax.
Gotcha. I want to touch on wounds real quick, because you said that you had some wounds. I've had them. I've done a lot of work on myself as well. What are some of the most common wounds that you've seen in men when you're doing the work, so that the listener can relate? Like, what does a wound mean? How deep does it go? And what are we talking about when we're mentioning wounds that affect our sexual nature as a man?
So I've spent my life navel gazing, picking myself apart, and particularly since my academic education is in these social sciences and sociology and psychology and etc. I'm my primary subject, regardless of how many people I work with. I've been working myself the longest. So at 43 now, there's so much that I've come to understand about the wounds of my own journey, and the roots of so many of them in childhood. So I grew up in a fairly volatile home environment. I mean, there's always worse, and there's certainly better, but I never knew when one of my parents was going to fly off the handle. And so I learned in childhood a certain hypervigilance. And that hypervigilance has been a double-edged sword, because it has fucked with my nervous system. I've shot my adrenals more than once. I can tend towards burnout in a variety of ways because my system has normalized a state of such uh, high stimulation that it unconsciously seeks it out,
Wow.
like to creates it in my life. I've had to do so much work to mitigate that. And that work is ongoing to mitigate that. But there's also been a light side to it, meaning like a positive benefit from that hypervigilance that was learned early is that I have developed a heightened level of attunement, which has served me sexually and professionally. That attunement is what makes me a great coach. I notice, I learned that I had to be so tuned into these very subtle dynamics between my parents or within anyone individually to try to anticipate what was about to happen when I never knew what was going to happen. And so like I pick up on notice these little things in people, whether it's clients. And notice like, oh, what just happened there? We're speaking about something and I notice the slightest little contraction in their voice or their posture that tells me something that's, beyond their words. And it makes me a better lover because I've learned to be so tuned into these subtleties of what is going on with my lover and within her body that most people are not noticing and are not picking up on. So that's one example.
Well, not just noticing. I think that, growing up as, a Jewish man, that's what we're talking about here. I wasn't taught to notice these types of things, right? I wasn't taught to, my father, may rest in peace, didn't talk about sex with me. It was kind of like, and then the people around me talked about sex in a very unhealthy way, where it was more, if you need more, go to a hooker, things like that, as opposed to how can you be in tune with your spouse, your wife, the person that you love, so that you can have the best sex and be the best lover
Exactly.
coming up in the future.
Exactly. So that like this is the thing about our wounds. Like our wounds can totally fuck us up, but
Yeah.
they can also be the root of our greatest gifts. And
Yes.
so like that's what I was pointing to with the little story that I shared. Like I have come to recognize that so many of the gifts that I bring forth to the world are rooted in those same traumas that I've spent all these decades trying to unravel.
And so is it safe to say that in order to become the best lover she's ever had and the man that she craves, that you first have to look into those wounds and see
I I'd
what's
say
going
that
on?
to be a man that the world needs and the one that that a woman really craves is includes a commitment to introspection, to continuously be willing to work on yourself, um, and yet to simply know yourself. I mean, this is one of the beauties of getting older is like every year I know myself more fully. I know my strengths better and better and how to work with them. I know my weaknesses better and better. I know like my dark side and how it tends to express itself better and better. Like
Right.
I know that the entire range better, in ways a decade ago, they just it was all unconscious. So it was doing what it was doing and both positively and negatively. And now it's like some of the same things may play out, but like I have a different awareness, which allows me to like, oh, I just slipped into that pattern again. I can recognize it and consciously change things.
I think that the majority of time we're running uh, in this unconscious race with everybody around us. And it takes
Yeah.
that sitting down and knowing ourselves. Like you said, I'm 42 this year and I'm a different person. I've learned a lot about myself, especially doing this podcast. But there's still this wanting to connect to that old me in a way out of comfort,
Yeah.
because getting to know myself is uncomfortable at
Hmm.
times.
Yep.
And it causes me to, instead of become the evolved masculine, to go back into like what I've known, seen, and heard from my past, because I've had much more trajectory of history sitting here
Sure.
as opposed to in the newness.
This is why it's really helpful to either have to have qualified support and
Yeah.
a community or brotherhood of other men and tribesmen who,
Yeah.
who are on this journey with you. because like most people in their day-to-day life, the people that they're surrounded by in their day-to-day life are not on that unintentional growth path in that way. Can they not like hold that conversation with them in that way? And in that way also are not necessarily helping hold a vision um of greatness
Yeah.
for you. But so find people, digitally or in person, communities and groups, coaching groups, what have you, who that's why we're all here, that's why we're here, is specifically for this reason, and allow it to be uh, like a center of gravity in your life. It's like that just keeps drawing you in the direction of what you're really wanting and craving, regardless of other people who are who may hold a past vision of you.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, 100%. And it comes into like, I did some digging. I listened to some podcasts that you were on before, read some of your stuff, obviously, to get ready for this. And there's the different energies, right? We talked about like our wounds. We talked about healing today and all the work that we're doing. And you mentioned a lot of like masculine and feminine energy when it comes to, sex, when it comes to becoming the evolved masculine. Can you explain that real quick? What masculine energy is and what feminine energy is, and why we have both?
Yeah, sure. So Webster's dictionary, I think, has fucked up a lot of us up in the U.S., particularly in a lot of Western countries, because they define masculine and feminine, or masculine, as like of man or something like that, like qualities of men, and feminine has qualities of women. Like it very simply defining that way and very specifically assigning it. If this is what men do, it is masculine. If this is what, and that as I've come to look at masculine and feminine and how they've been related through different culture or by different cultures throughout time, that's more of a minority opinion. What I find much more fascinating and useful, particularly come from certain Eastern perspectives, tantric and Taoist perspectives. I'm particularly partial to tantric perspectives, which view masculine and feminine as these energies that permeate the universe. David Data has particularly helped popularize his particular slant on on masculine and feminine energies, which is rooted, he's rooted in a particular tantric perspective. I'm referencing him, and can definitely say he had an impact on my journey. But I also, anytime I do so, I have to give the caveat that we definitely have our places of divergence in our belief systems. But your masculinity has nothing to do with sports teams, beer, fancy car, sport. What did I just say? These things. There's a difference between the culture of men and masculine energy. Masculine energy to me is about consciousness, like stillness, be witnessing without judgment. This is one of the things that has really affected me. That part of you that can see and experience both externally and what's going on in your head without like assigning like good, bad, various emotions to it, but just simply notices, observes, is with it. When we drop into a state of meditation, you're dropping into that masculine consciousness, that pure beingness and of awareness, just awareness. So this is also about like creating safety. This is what I believe is a core piece, if not the core piece, of what's being called forth from men and the masculine in today's time, is creating the space where women and the feminine is safe to truly flourish. I believe that there is this rebalancing of like this, of the feminine coming to greater balance with the masculine on the planet right now. And with that, like, this is about us helping hold ourselves and each other accountable in how we create that safety, so that women are safe to walk down the street at night, are safe to figure out how they want to express themselves in the world, whether we're talking about their sexual expression or of like how they dress when they go to school, work, or the bar, to figure out how they, the impact that they want to be having on the world and feeling safe in the workplace or wherever else, as well as just the feminine within ourselves. If we get to the feminine as like the emotional body, the range of what we feel, the flow. You can think of it, the receptivity. Receptivity is not necessarily passive; it just absorbs, it takes in.
Got it.
So these are just a few of the differentiators. But the thing is that all of these exist within ourselves. So even your masculine part of yourself that can create safety for you to feel, because that's something that a lot of men struggle with. It's just fucking feeling.
Dude, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that I probably saw my father cry twice in my life. Mm-hmm. And the other men around me weren't about how are you doing? It was how's business, sure. Right? Yeah. And so, and even to this day, like I might go to synagogue or I'll go to an event and I'd say, hey, how are you? How's business? Like right away, just, hey, how are you? How's business? Like just sliding past like looking into each other's eyes and saying like, how are you?
Sure.
Being like you talked about, like the brotherhood, like I'm here for you, whatever that you need. But we're so scared to talk about those emotions and feelings. Yeah. And I think, again, I think that's where the evolved masculine comes in. If we were to talk about those emotions and be present with our wives, with our spouses, that's the man that she wants you to be. That's the one that she craves.
Yes. And I need a little caveat there. Yeah. That, so we also have a phenomenon of where men are so isolated, and particularly emotionally isolated from other men, that quite often the woman in their life, their wife, girlfriend, whatever, becomes their sole point of emotional support. And women have been kind of increasingly vocal of that's not working for us.
True that.
and like I get it, I mean, it's saying like it's a lot to ask any single person to be the outlet for everything that goes on inside of you. And if she is playing that role, it can also take away from other aspects of the dynamic that you two want to be having with one another. So this is another reason why that brotherhood is very helpful, to have other men who you can share your what's going on in your internal world with. And one of the things I say in the communities that I run, whether the Evolved Masculine community or sexual self-mastery training, is I've learned that men really need these two different pieces held simultaneously. That quite often in men's groups, I see one or the other. So both a place for your vulnerabilities, your places where you feel weak or you're struggling, your challenge, your emotions, etc., and a place that you can be reminded of and challenged into the great strength that exists within you. And often, again, often I see men's groups are either all about like, let's just sit around and talk about our feelings, or it's all like, we're fucking warriors, like, let's crush it, and there's no space for your emotions and your vulnerabilities. We need both.
Yeah. Yes. I agree. It's either like alpha male, go kill, the meat and bring it back in a hunt and fuck you and don't feel and just go do it. Or like be very into your emotion and not go do what you talked about. This is a great line, by the way, the great strength within you. Mm-hmm. And I think that when we have that strength within us, I was talking about this morning with somebody. There's something called gevurah in Hebrew, which is like your inner strength.
How do you say it?
Gevurah.
Gevurah.
Yeah. So there's inner strength and there's the outer strength, right? And so I was learning about like the inner strength and what it takes to be able to have the inner strength, go to battle within you to be able to heal the wounds, be present with your partner. And that to me is such a greater challenge than doing 50 push-ups and 100 pull-ups.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, though, like for most men, but then there will be men who are on the other side of the spectrum who really took in that message around maybe mother's influence and lack of father's influence, maybe other things, maybe a reaction to the way the dad was, and like got super in touch with their emotions. And but that aspect of that warrior within, that like I'm gonna do 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups, whatever, is like, you know, nowhere. They don't have that access.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's because a lot of times in my, I like to be very transparent on these things, right? Like in my case, my dad was working a lot. I was with my mom, and I had to navigate my mom's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in touch a lot more with the feminine energy as opposed to the masculine.
Yeah.
Right.
So again, like in some circles, like the message is essentially like, stop that, and like just focus on deepening your embodiment of the masculine. And I don't believe in that. I really don't. The path that you took with your connection, you know, your relationship to your mom had its shadow, you know, had its dark side, but it also served you.
100%.
It's also brought you incredible gifts. And like, why not continue to own and cultivate those gifts while strengthening your relationship to your masculinity?
Yeah. There was a big part of my life that was just sex. Like there was no emotion. It was the only way I could, you know, get out whatever I was feeling was through penetration, was through sex. Until like I did a lot of work on myself, like you said, you know, courses, therapies, all these types of things. And I thought, and I was realizing that like, wait a second, I'm masking something that's going on, and I can't continue this way because it's going to mess up, you know, a future relationships. And thankfully my wife today is very patient with me because we're still working, right? Like, all the time. It's a work in progress all the time.
All the time.
But like, I agree with you. What I learned from being with my mom so much and being in tune has helped me a lot today. But like you said, and I've got to also be in tune with that great strength within.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, and I'm sure everybody else is, you know, we've talked about wounds, we've talked about other stuff, sexual self-mastery.
Right.
A lot of guys will listen to this and be like, oh, that means I can just fuck really well. I can last a long time. Or take it to the other side. I can last for 12 hours and never come and just, you know, give my spouse pleasure for hours upon hours. What the hell is sexual self-mastery?
Well, a true sexual mastery period is a big word.
Yes.
You know, it's not binary. It's not like you've got it or you don't. Any path of mastery is a lifelong path. You can continue to develop and cultivate greater levels of mastery, including here. So everything that you described, yeah, it's all possible. And it can all be part of your sense of like, yes, I have that, and therefore, but it doesn't end there either. To me, it's really about being able to connect to your sexual energy as an energy, first and foremost. That it's not just, oh, look, I'm hard. Oh, look, you know, I want to fuck. And I really hope it's okay that I didn't.
Oh, yeah, you can. No worries.
Originally from New York.
No, all good.
and that you can. Sorry, completely dropped.
Talk about sexual energy being hard, and that's
yeah,
it, like
that. Yeah, and I just want to fuck all the way, or then I've come and now like I've like lost interest or I've lost direction. I mean, but rather like when you experience arousal, when you get turned on. First of all, I like that phrase "turned on" because that's what happens, doesn't it? It's like it's all of a sudden there's this greater sense of aliveness inside of you. And it's like a switch being turned on. There's this increase of electric activity through your system or energy. And so we can learn to develop more of a awareness and attunement to that energy, what we're feeling in the body on these subtle levels and where we're feeling it. And as we come to develop those awarenesses that we didn't previously have, we can start making little changes to what we're doing that can create completely different experiences within us. So for example, if you've ever come before you wanted to, which, you know, the medical community refers to premature ejaculation as anything under 2 minutes or whatever the number they put it to. But I think that that's a poor definition. Premature ejaculation is ejaculating before you wanted to.
Period.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. So if you didn't want to, and particularly if it leaves you and or your partner feeling unsatisfied, then it was premature.
Yeah.
And let's remove any shame elements about it, but more laying out that there are other ways. Chances are, if you are coming before you want to, whether habitually or just like occasionally, there are habit patterns that you have developed in your body that are cascading you towards ejaculation without you knowing it.
Okay.
And we can develop an awareness of what those habit patterns are, of what is happening inside of here. And then we can start to change those. So yes, one part of it is learning to be able to last as long as you want, gain true choice around when or even if you ejaculate. And that is a big selling point for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it, in many ways, like I call it the first gate of 4 gates. Like there's so much more beyond that. Once you cross that threshold, then things change for both of you. When there's no part of you that worries about whether you're going to do this or that and it's going to be too much, something in you just relaxes and you can be in the experience in a completely new way. But more so does she. For a lot of women, they learned through repeated experiences with men over the years that she doesn't know when you're going to come. And therefore, if she wants to make sure that she comes, she's got to be like chasing after or reaching for her orgasm to try to get it before your ticking time bomb goes off.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of women learn this like unconsciously, you know, but it just becomes habit pattern for them. But when she learns through experience that, yeah, that's not an issue here at all, something in her can relax further. And she can start to surrender more fully to the experience instead of reaching towards. And in that relaxed state, in the face of pleasure, there's greater levels of pleasure and orgasmic experiences that are possible, as well as just the depth of like intimacy as well as passion that can occur is far greater.
I love that. And so when you talk about the level of intimacy, I think it also starts with what's on the banner, right? Like craving each other.
Yeah.
And I think that one reason people reach out to you or want to learn more about this is because we want our wives, our spouses, our girlfriends to crave us. You know, like it's kind of weird, but I think that we've been programmed maybe incorrectly that we want like to come home and, you know, our wives or spouses, girlfriends take off our, you know, be like, I want you now, just take off all the clothes, regardless if the kids are making a mess or whatever that is. But I want that. Like, I want that feeling that my wife looks at me, right? And she's like, God, I want you now. And I think she wants that as well. How do we create that like true intimacy without the action of intimacy to be able to crave each other on such a level that we're just consistently turned on being around?
So I you ask great big questions. So so there are 2 different questions there, like your craving of her as well as her craving of you.
Yeah.
I'm going to focus on her since that's where you started the question, and feel free to ask it again if you want the other part. The most women have what's called a responsive sexual desire, which you know, not universal, but again, the tendency is in that direction, which versus spontaneous sexual desire, which is more common in men, and it flips. Sometimes it can be the other way around. Spontaneous is like absolutely nothing can bring you to a place of I want you, you know, it just like I'm horny. Whereas those with a responsive sexual desire, something has to get it moving within them. The turn on comes first, and then the thought. um, and so some say that like foreplay starts right after sex ends. So everything that happens in the space between
I like that.
affects that level of like if there's desire there, or when, or how much. Like, and yeah, you mentioned marriage, and I don't know like what the demographics are of our listeners, but you know, cultivating this type of sexual desire in a long-term relationship or marriage ends up being quite different from year one. And since you asked to, let's address it in the long term. One, no matter what, marriages and the very long-term relationships are going to have their cycles. They're going to have times that you're more sexual and you're both feeling more desirous of one another, or just the two of you are getting along better, period. And times where you're more challenged, sexual intimacy becomes a little bit more sparse. And I think that there's an element of that is both normal and totally okay. And we can get into these ruts that we just get stuck in. And that stuckness can last for months, or for some people years, or some people decades. That is very much worth like more specifically addressing.
Yeah.
Quite often, there's unresolved emotional shit in there that has come up between the two of you, and it has caused like hidden resentments, or not so hidden resentments, that are interfering with sexual desire. And so this gets back to why it's very useful to be if you want to be the man that she craves, to be in that commitment to that like the introspection and doing your work.
Agreed. Again,
So
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of speaking to the less sexy parts of it.
No,
So
no, this is perfect.
I want to get to a little bit more sexy component of it, in that I made a point very early, like right, yeah, in my relationship with my wife. We've now been together 8 years this month, I think, and married for almost 5. That there are certain things that I just put into, I put into every day, you know. So before every meal, before the first bite of food, we kiss.
Amazing.
It and I've also made a point to make sure that it's not a thoughtless kiss. Like, we pause for an extra second
Wow.
to make sure that we feel one another, and then kiss, you know, and feel the lips like just touch, or like slowly graze across one another. Like, so the thing about practice, and it's a practice that we ended up taking in, and we've been doing for 8 years, is that sometimes we're super in the mood for that, and it's good, and maybe it's extra long or extra juicy or what have you. But sometimes, like, we're in a state of contraction with one another. We've been like just fighting for the past 12 hours or what have you, you know, like things are just like, and then it's like mealtime, and we've had more moments where we're like, and just kind of look at each other. But it also always kind of brings a slight little smile to the face of like, okay. And no matter how things were, it acts as a certain pattern interrupt, and just just reminds us of our connection. We do, no matter what, no matter how we're feeling. And even if in that moment it doesn't bring us that same level of juice it does when we're already feeling yummy, it breaks things up and makes us a little bit closer than we were before. So it's things like that. When we walk by one another, to intentionally just let our hands graze, or a little like slap on the butt, and just, you know, things like that, that just like little things that we make a point to bring into day to day, that are not dependent on being in the mood. And by doing so, by making sure that they're just always there, it helps increase the frequency of being in the mood.
I love it. The kiss before the meal, I see it as, in Judaism, we have gratitude where you say a prayer on the food. This is
Mm.
like gratitude to my spouse
Mm.
for the
It's funny that you say that, because I don't know when I took this on, and but whenever I'm somewhere else and not with her, and like I just do like a less than 5 second, 3 second little moment with my food.
yeah,
I do a short little prayer to my wife. It's just like I take a moment to feel her, or to
yeah,
send her love or connect, whatever,
it's
before I start.
beautiful. Because yeah, you're not there, but you're still in the moment. You don't want to give up um, the beauty of that tradition or of that connection, and so doing that
Yeah.
still connects you to that place of gratitude for her and blessing for her.
Yeah. So
I
like
love that.
the last vow of our wedding vows is to commit to our marriage and our relationship as our most profound spiritual practice, and one without a goal or end to get to. And
Wow,
so
amazing.
things like this are things that we put into place, ritual, ceremony, etc., to be spiritual practice. And again, it's independent of even how we are feeling about one another at the time, let alone or when we last had sex or when we're next going to have sex. But it keeps something strong between us over the years that does improve the sex life.
And not just the sex life, but what I'm hearing is this is a way to connect to your wife, to your spouse, what we're talking about, where she does crave you,
Yeah.
right? Like when she knows that there's a kiss before a meal and that gratitude. And if you're out on a trip and you're, sending prayers her way, and when you come home, how do you not crave each other? Like I think there's this moment of like we're connected physically, we're connected emotionally, intimately, and spiritually, and so we want to become one. Let's hug, kiss, have sex, um, to be able to grow, like you said, spiritually, regardless if we're together or not.
Yeah, it helps a lot. And I try to really stress that we don't have a perfect marriage, but we do have an incredible marriage.
Oh, awesome.
Like we've faced some fucking difficulties. We've had moments where we were, uh, I, oh, I read something one time of some elderly couple asking like how they'd been together for 50 years, and the woman said, well, the secret is you can't both want a divorce at the same time. And I've always remembered that, because like I feel like I understand. um
Yeah.
like we've had so many of the issues and challenges that so many couples end up having. We've had moments where we're so close to breaking, and we've moved through them repeatedly, and all these different things that we put into place have helped, I think, have helped dramatically.
I do want to say something to the people who are listening. I've gone through the same stuff where my marriage was close to breaking, when my wife was hyperemesis in bed for 7 months,
Mm.
disconnection of, physical connect, like all that type of stuff. So if you're listening to this and you think you're alone at going through hell in your marriage, like you are not alone. I think the difference between Destin and I are that we've done enough work that we can raise our hand and say, hey, I need some help. Or
Yeah.
that we can go to our spouse and say, hey, things aren't okay at the moment, as opposed to just throwing it under the rug. And I think that's the secret to a great marriage, is not being numb to the fact that it's not great and just staying contracted in the same place.
I 100% agree with you. With both of those points. One, I think that large segments of couples had built up ways to not feel it, to ignore it.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the reason why we have gotten so close to ending it more than once is because we don't do that. We like and my wife and I both like we feel intensely
Yeah.
and express it all and move through it all. But instead of just like, let me spend every night at the bar and avoid going home type of things. So, but the other piece that I think is so key, as you said, is yeah, being supported. Everything from having other couples in our lives who have great marriages, if with their own sets of challenges, but great marriages that we can speak to also, like, we'll hire professionals and get support that way as well. Like, there's there's little of anything that I value more than my family, and therefore, if I'm going to put money into something to make sure it's strong and to make sure that it's growing, and my marriage is a great place for me to be putting it.
It's, I think, the number one investment you should have. Like, we spend so much money on our business, on trips, on houses, on cars. And I'm hearing these days there's a lot of Jewish men who are separating from their wives, getting divorces. And when I ask, have you gotten help? And the answer is usually no.
Or when people end up getting help, it's because things are so friggin' far gone by that point.
Yeah.
It can end up being too little too late.
Yeah.
So if anything, I just want to encourage, like, do it sooner.
Yeah. or people will say, like, I went to go see one therapist and it didn't work out.
Which can happen.
But that's it.
Happen.
Like, that's all. Yeah. That's it. That's all you did. Like, let's go to, like, get that great strength within you, which is what you said, and go to war for our families, the way we go to war for our business.
Yep. Like that element of, like, whatever it takes, I'm going to get the support that we need I'm going to find, like, the right support so that we have what we need so we can thrive. There's another thing that's affected. I tend to think of it at this point as relationship hygiene. Like, I want my wife and I to always be doing something that whether it's being part of some couples oriented community or some seminar or workshop or training that we're involved in, or some coach or therapist that we're working with. I want us to, like, pretty much always have something that we're doing that supports us as relationship hygiene, to kind of just help keep things, like brushing teeth, like I don't want to wait until, I've got a cavity, I should start brushing my teeth.
And not leave it as, like, far down your to-do list. So I've got 4 things I look at every single day, right? And I call them my 4 C's. I call them the focus 4. And there's connection, which is a connection with my wife and my family. There's my currency, which is my business, my condition, which is my body, and my conviction, which is that inner strength. And so if you write down every single day, how can I improve these 4 aspects of my life every single day and make it intentional, I think that you can't put it under the rug and wait till it's gotten too bad. But you've got to be at a place to say, I'm going to be, I think this encompasses what you say about the evolved masculine, which is, I'm going to make it an effort to evolve who I am to better the woman in my life, the people around me, and lead like never before.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Awesome. Man, Destin, this has been epic, bro. I want to make sure that people know, if you want that sexual self-mastery, if you want to become the evolved masculine, reach out to Destin. Go to his website, evolvedmasculine.com/tribesmen, and we'll be able to, he'll welcome you with open arms into his community.
I haven't set it up yet, but by the time you end up hearing this, I probably will have, so that I'm going to create some form of free gift or some sort of offering for you, either around the sexual self-mastery or specifically around the evolved masculine. So do check it out if you're resonant with me in this conversation that we're having. I want there to be something specific for you as a listener to the Tribesmen podcast.
Awesome. Destin, thank you so much for, 1, being on the show, 2, for everything that you do to create evolved masculine men, especially with having 3 daughters in the world. And my whole goal is to build a legion of leaders so my daughters grow up in a better world. And you're helping me in that. So thank you so much.
And vice versa. I hold a very similar statement within myself with having a young daughter. So thank you for helping me with what I'm trying to do.
Awesome, brother. Tribesmen, don't forget to join us in the podcast community at Tribesmen Jewish Men Leading, and go to tribesmen.com to listen to more episodes of the podcast. And please check out Destin Gerek and all over social. You're on Facebook, Instagram, all those awesome places at Destin Gerek, correct?
Yeah, some of them are at Evolved Masculine.
Gotcha. All right, so we'll put in the show notes. If you want to find Destin, reach out to me and we'll get you connected. Destin, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
And as we say here on the show, strength and courage. Have an amazing day.